So if you give me just a few minutes, we're going to solve why your character dialogue always sounds like it's happening between a brother and a sister. So the answer is power dynamics. So every relationship is imbalanced. That's just the nature of things. When two people are in a room, there is always a power imbalance in a relationship. So we see this is pretty obvious. Like if you are driving your car and you got pulled over by a police officer, they're asking you questions. You're probably not going to give a sarcastic answer. You're probably not going to beat around the bush. They're going to ask you, "Have you been drinking tonight?" And you're going to say, "No, sir." Right? They're going to ask, "Do you know how fast you were going?" And you're going to say, "I don't answer questions." Right? But you're going to get right to the point because you recognize there's a power imbalance there. Like they can do sort of anything they want to you, right? And even if it's wrong, you still kind of have to go along with it until you can fix it later. And so we usually get this right in fantasy. Everybody's like, "Yes, my liege, yes, my lady," whatever, for things like regal fantasy and things like that. So we understand this in some situations, but we don't really apply it to all kinds of situations like we should. And again, this is why a lot of your dialogue sounds like banter between brother and sister. So these power dynamics are always at play in any relationship. And so, one person has more power than another. And when both parties don't agree, that's when conflict happens. So let's say that we're hanging out, we're doing something, or we're doing some kind of project together. If we both agree that I'm the leader and you're the follower, we'll get along. If we both agree that you're the leader and I'm the follower, we will also get along. Conflict happens when we disagree and we both think that we're the leader. Conflict also happens when we disagree and we both think that we're the follower, right? Because we're not going to be moving effectively towards anything that we want to do. Here's where it gets hard because not everybody responds to power dynamics in the same way. So this is where you have to do the hard work to figure out what are the power dynamics in this relationship, like these two people that are talking, who actually has more power, but who believes they have more power, and do they agree? Do they have different opinions about where the power lies, and how is that going to affect the way that they interact? So for instance, insecure people typically react to authority, right? They're going to behave in a particular way because they're insecure. And so for some people, they're going to respond sarcastically to authority because they want to challenge it, but they can't actually. So they have to kind of pseudo challenge authority with sarcasm. Other people are going to become really submissive, excessively submissive when they're confronted with authority, but it's going to change character by character. Think about how a secure person reacts to authority. And again, that's going to be different for everybody. But if somebody who's secure in their value and in who they are, and they're confronted with authority, a lot of times they have no problem stepping into a follower role. But the way that they perceive that, whether they perceive that person to be deserving of leadership and authority or not, is still going to impact the way that they respond to them, the way that they phrase things. Do they get directly to the point? Do they answer questions with another question? Do they beat around the bush and things like that? In the same way, secure people will typically fill a leadership void. So even if there is a leader, if that person isn't being very leaderful, someone who is secure, knows their abilities and their value is going to have no problem just stepping in to become the leader. What kind of conflict is that going to create in your dialogue? By the same token, insecure people won't step into leadership even when they're truly the most qualified person. Even though they have the expertise, they have the whatever it takes to get the job done, they're going to deny that leadership. And again, that's going to change the way that people interact. So start paying attention to this in your real life, in the way that you interact with people that have more or less power and authority than you, in the way you watch other people interact. How do people interact with the server at a restaurant? How do people interact with their teachers? How do people interact with their parents or the police? How does it change the way that you interact with your parents, for instance, as you get older? Right? There comes this, like, you grow up and your parents have authority over you, right? As they should. But there comes a place eventually when you start to exercise more authority over your parents as they age, and you have to help them make good decisions and things like that. So start paying attention to how those things change and how those things operate. And it's going to bring so much more depth and value to your dialogue. And it's going to bring a lot of variety to your dialogue that you're probably missing now because everybody is like a brother and a sister who are always sort of just competing for leadership in the conversation rather than recognizing how their personalities and their insecurities interplay with those power dynamics in that relationship. So, as you're thinking about any character, just ask this question: How does this character understand their power in this relationship? A great follow up question is, do both parties in this dialogue agree where the power and the authority in this conversation and in this relationship lies? And that's a deep well to explore. And again, it's going to bring so much more value, so much more depth to your dialogue. So, of course, I'd love to have you subscribe if you want to keep talking about writing stuff together, and hop over to writers.company and see what we got going on there.